one of the design decisions that each of Medicaid and Blue Cross are making independently as part of this is who should be the principal accountable provider. So as Steve had described previously, as under the current system, patients will be kind of free to see the providers whom they would have seen in the past. All providers will submit claims, which will be reimbursed as they have been in the past. And then for each episode, one provider will be determined as the accountable provider. And so all the performance analysis will be the average for that physician, or could be the average for a hospital. And page 26 just lays out some of the criteria that the payers have thought through with input from the clinical advisors in order to arrive for each episode at who really is best positioned to be that principal accountable provider, the quarterback on the team, so to speak. And this, for many of the episodes rolled out in Wave 1, it was a physician. It was not always a physician. Congestive heart failure, acute, post-acute, it was actually the hospital that was determined to be the principal accountable provider. But so in this case, the three criteria that we considered, one was we want it to be a provider who has significant decision-making authority. So going back to all those different points of leverage over influencing cost and quality that Dr. Golden had introduced for cholecystectomy, which provider really has significant decision-making responsibility. Second would be who is in the best position to influence other providers, right? So if somebody is going to kind of put their hand up and kind of organize the team, call a quality improvement or efficiency team together to drive improvements, who's in the best position to do that? And then third, we want it to be a provider who, within the fee-for-service system, they bear a material portion of the cost. It doesn't have to be the majority of the cost, but they have to have enough skin in the game that the rewards or potential penalties, that you have something to work with. And so in this case, you'll see how we kind of scored between the primary surgeon, the facility, and referring providers. And based on this consideration, Medicaid has determined that the principal accountable provider for the cholecystectomy, it seems best to be placed with the general surgeon. It's not to say that the general surgeon is going to do this on his or her own, but rather that the general surgeon would be the principal accountable provider and then could seek to support or participation from other providers with whom they work to improve performance.
The way the episode is put together, just if you drop back 25 feet, in many ways this is a light version of what an ACO is, okay? But right now, most folks aren't in ACOs. The episode we're discussing here, and in the other episodes as well, there is one PAP, or one accountable provider. That one provider gets the bonus or the risk. Now, it's up to them about whether sharing the data, but in many ways, their management will result in either a revenue neutral, a gain, or a share, or a risk. But in this particular episode here, unless you have some sort of contractual salaried relationship with the hospital, which confuses things a little bit, if you are an independent provider with independent billing, the bonus goes to you and to your group.
So if you are in a salaried position, what is your plan for reconciling that?
That gets complicated. Depends on your local arrangements in the billing office that you're in.
As far as the payer is concerned, the bonus payment will go to the contracted party. So if that's a hospital system or an integrated delivery system, it would go to that contracted party. And then how they share it with you as a salaried physician depends on your contractual arrangement. And it may be that historically a salaried physician's employment arrangement had no relationship to their efficiency for an episode or quality of care. We fully anticipate and hope in the future that if you're a salaried physician and you find that you're actually driving kind of superior performance for your institution, we fully expect that is going to lead to a conversation between those physicians and the organization that they're part of.
In the same token, say that you happen to be one of the outliers and you're employed. Now, you're going to go after the individual physician, or you're going to go after the contractual contract holder?
It will be the contracted party. So there would be a decrease in their reimbursements to kind of recover those additional costs, which, again, as Dr. Golden described, for Medicaid, there's a stop-loss limit of basically 10% of a provider's reimbursement. So that's the most that kind of decrement to future payments could be for the small segment of providers that are in the red. And for Blue Cross, that's at 20% of their reimbursement.
But fair warning.
Oh, it's 10% for Blue Cross as well? Okay, thank you for
fair warning. At least the way I understand it, at least on the Medicaid side, if you are an outlier, and let's say you were in a risk-sharing relationship, the dollars would be recouped or would be assessed on your future payments.
Right.
So you could be in a situation where your billings under your physician billing number to your contractual arrangement would be reduced in the coming year. So how that plays out locally, I can't tell you. So it wouldn't necessarily be an assessment to your directly to the contracting agency, but it would be reflected on your future billings.
So, and all of this is a change that Medicaid and Blue Cross made from the original design was that kind of a lump sum would be kind of put on the table, let's say for the general surgeon, and then the general surgeon would need to go and subcontract with the hospital, with the pharmacy, with the lab, and by the way, not just for the gains or losses, but actually for the base reimbursement. So that was abandoned for these episodes in favor of kind of keeping the existing financial relationships intact and having this just be kind of a piggyback at the back end with some with either bonuses or excess costs passed on to one provider.
One other thing that I think is important in this is that, when you look at the distribution of cost, if you're already a very efficient provider, there's a good possibility that you don't have to do a darn thing different and you're going to be in a surplus sharing. We didn't want to create a situation where people that were doing a real good job already had to find a way to get significantly better when they were already doing a good job in order to be incentivized. So if you're already doing a good job, then chances are you're going to be recognized for that good job and you're not going to have to do anything significantly different.
Question though.
Yes.
So if you were, say, in the portion that had to pay back, Dr. Goldner, can anybody explain, would it be similar to how the IQI payment is? Would it be a percentage? You'd say 10%. So say this physician billed 25 surgery cases for the performance period. So 10% of the reimbursement of the billed services for that. So would it be specifically for all billed surgical cases until they met that for the next year, or how would it be worked out so that we have contracted physicians that work for us? How would we know how much to expect in decreased reimbursement?
Not quite sure I followed it. Well, first of all, we hope that only a minority of physicians are in that zone. And second of all, we can be doing this program with gain sharing without anybody in the red zone. We're hoping that the whole curve shifts so there's not going to be a mandatory collection of people who are at risk. Now, getting back to your question, the IQI is a pure bonus program. So there's no risk sharing at all. And that's a bonus check at the end of the year to the hospital. In this episode, Steve, help me out here. If people are going to be gain sharing, do you get them a bonus check, or is it future on a quarterly basis? Or
for Blue Cross, we would just cut them a one-time check for shared savings. If it was shared risk, we would offset future payments over like a 6-month period of time so that it wouldn't impact one RA, as significantly as it would otherwise.
Right. So that means that if there was a contracted physician at your institution that was at risk and had to share the risk, then in the next year, their clinical revenue would be diminished by a certain amount until that had met.
Right, and I also just want to elaborate on that. So in that next year, it would be any and all of their reimbursement from that payer that would be used to pay that back. Right. So if you're a general surgeon and you do a wide range of cases. Cholecystectomies is only part of it, and your costs are significantly above that acceptable level. You're, a real outlier. The contracted party will get a report that will say, here was your performance. Here's how it compared to the acceptable performance. By the way, you'll get that first report in April that will kind of show it historically. So if that's historically been kind of the pattern, you'll know that, and you'll have time to start to understand kind of what is driving this and make some adjustments. And then at the end of the performance period, at the end of the year, if you're still in the red, you get a report that would show you're in the red. Here was your performance versus the average on an absolute and risk-adjusted basis. And here's your share of those extraordinary costs. And it might say it's $6,000 in total dollars for that. Then going forward, that contracted party's reimbursement, let's say from Medicaid, would be decreased by an amount to pay back that $6,000, so to speak. But there's a cap that your reimbursement would not be decreased by more than 10%. And that's just to protect kind of cash flow. And then in the future, let's say that within general surgery, there are 3 or 5 different procedures for which are now an episode-based payment. It's the same cap, right? It's all kind of evaluated in aggregate. So now you actually have extraordinarily high costs across 3 or 4 different procedures. However, the cap of the penalty would be 10% of your Medicaid reimbursement in the coming year.
And also follow up, we don't want anybody blindsided by this. So there will be in April you get a report card, gives you where you've been in the previous year, get time to adjust, and you will then get quarterly report cards. So you are liable, or you're at risk, or for gain sharing or risk sharing for a full year of activity. But you will be getting quarterly report cards to give you an assessment of where you are and where you're heading, so that there's plenty of time for mid-course correction.
Right, and just to clarify, we talked about on the front end where the shared savings would be 50% of the savings that was generated by the principal accountable provider. The same goes on the shared cost. It would be 50% of the excess cost as well. Up to that 10% limit, right?
Okay, so you said that, so like you were saying, colonoscopies is also going to be one of those. So if this, and I'm just doing this because my CFO wanted me to ask. I mean, personally,
Sure.
I think we're probably going to be fine. So, but I have to have an answer when I go back because he wants to know, is this going to be per diem, per patient? This gives me a good idea of what to tell him. So colonoscopy, the meeting is Wednesday. So when you're saying the 10% cap, heaven forbid I have a group of physicians that works for us and they're going to hit that threshold for both of those, but there's a 10% cap for both of those combined. Is that what you're telling me?
So what I mean to describe is simply that if you have a contracted party that where multiple episodes apply, then that it would be up to that amount. For the majority of general surgeons in this case, and the majority of GI docs in the state, they're going to be evaluated on an independent basis, right? And so, for general surgery, kind of near term, that stop loss provision will be applied for cholecystectomy, but then other procedures down the road may be added. Oh, some do colonoscopy as well.
Well, and frankly, we've not had a situation yet that we've had to address that have one PAP that is accountable for more than one episode. I mean, from Blue Cross's perspective, I don't know what the answer to that is, but ultimately we're going to be, as fair as we can be with that.
5 years from now, when the surgeons in the state have gotten adept at this and become much more cost efficient, is the baseline going to be reset for the physicians and the hospitals?
I think that's an excellent question, and I get it at just about every one of these work groups. And I think the issue is what we're trying to do initially is to identify and eliminate unjustifiable expense. I think what you'll see, if you remember that graph and the bars that were acceptable, commendable, and lower limit, I think what you'll see is compression happen faster between the acceptable and the commendable. I'm not so sure that, well, you can see it now, I'm not so sure that the commendable level will have to be compressed nearly as fast, simply because if you free up all that excess between unacceptable and between acceptable and commendable, what you're able to do is maintain cost, maintain premiums for your policyholders while still maintaining the ability for surgeons to get to that commendable level. our thinking on that is we want to make sure that it's always possible for the good performers to be rewarded. I mean, time will tell as far as what regulations and what laws will dictate as far as how much money is available to the system. But if we can make this work early on, chances are it's going to be sustainable for a longer period of time.
And again, we're not trying to solve the entire cost problem here. We're trying to bend the cost curve, reduce the rate of increase in costs. And as we've been presenting this to the other episode groups, the wheels are turning and people are already making adjustments. So, one of our goals was just to change the conversation and change people's thinking about how they deliver care. And in many ways, with the first 5 episodes, it's been very successful.